Hello, friends. We are very interested to know which cities you are listening to us from, so quickly like and write in the comments where you are from. Also, share what shocking stories happened in your city or maybe even with you personally. Subscribe because the next story could be about your city or even your personal drama. Now let's dive into a new exciting story. Thomas Hill pushed open the front door, his police uniform slightly wrinkled from his 12-hour night shift. The boots thudded on the wooden floor, and the keys fell with a clang on the table in the hallway. He was 40, broad-shouldered, with a clear jawline that had not yet been completely blurred by the fine wrinkles around his eyes. His dark hair was already streaked with gray, a sign of sleepless nights and stress. He moved quietly, out of habit, not wanting to wake the children. But the house seemed different today. Maybe it was the cold light streaming through the blinds, or the lack of a radio that Olivia usually left on. In the kitchen, Olivia Hill stood at the countertop. At 38, she was still an eye-catcher. Sharp cheekbones, piercing brown-green eyes, and reddish hair casually tied into a bun. She poured coffee into the thermos, moving quickly, almost mechanically. Thomas stopped in the doorway, looking at her. She didn't hear him enter. "Good morning," he said, his voice low, hoarse with fatigue. Olivia tensed slightly, but immediately turned around. "Hello," she answered, throwing a short smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Long night, as usual." He shrugged, unbuttoning the top button of his uniform. "A couple drunk driving, a family quarrel that went nowhere. How are you?" "Busy." She screwed on the lid of the thermos, holding her fingers on it. "At 3 in the morning, a serious case arrived. I had to run." Thomas nodded, waiting for her to continue, but she fell silent. He walked to the refrigerator, taking out a carton of orange juice. "Are the children up yet?" "Not yet." Alexa was probably buried in her phone, and Noah was buried in the blankets. Olivia's voice was harsh, as if she was already mentally somewhere else. She glanced at her watch. "I have to go. Early meeting before shift." "Already?" Thomas put the juice on the table, looking at her. "Usually you at least cook breakfast." Olivia froze, her hand gripping the thermos a little tighter. "I don't have time, Tom. I spent half the night in the hospital yesterday." She turned away, grabbing her bag from the hook by the door. "Deal with the kids, okay? Make sure they are not late for school." Thomas opened his mouth to answer, but she had already taken a step towards the exit. "Olivia," he called, and she stopped without turning around. "Everything is fine?" She hesitated, then said over her shoulder, "Yes, everything is fine. I'm just tired." The door slammed behind her, and a second later he heard her old Honda Civic start up. Thomas was left standing in the middle of the kitchen, looking at the empty countertop. There was usually some toast on it, a bowl of cereal, or at least a couple of apples for the kids. Today, nothing. He ran his hand over the back of his head, feeling the fatigue creeping in more and more. The night shift was exhausting, but it wasn't just that. Something between him and Olivia changed. He couldn't say exactly what it was, but the chill that he felt more and more often was now almost tangible. Heavy footsteps were heard on the stairs, and Alexa, their 15-year-old daughter, stumbled into the kitchen. Her black hair with purple streaks was disheveled, and a t-shirt with the logo of some indie band hung on her like on a coat rack. She threw her backpack on the floor and stared at the empty table. "Seriously?" she said, crossing her arms. "Where is the food?" "Mom left again." "She left for work," Thomas answered, trying to speak calmly. "Early meeting. I'll cook something." Alexa rolled her eyes. "Certainly. As if you can." She plopped down on a chair, pulling out her phone. Her fingers ran across the screen, and the kitchen was filled with the sounds of notifications. Thomas suppressed a sigh as he opened the closet. "Will scrambled eggs be okay?" "Nope. I'm actually a vegan now, remember?" Alexa didn't even look up. "At least Mom made smoothies." "Since when are you vegan?" Thomas frowned, taking out a frying pan. "Last week you ate pepperoni pizza." "It was last week, Dad. People change." She snorted, but there was more irritation in her voice than sarcasm. Maybe if you were home more often, you would notice. Thomas clenched his jaw, but remained silent. He knew Alexa was right, at least partly. His schedule at the station was hellish. Night shifts, overtime, calls at any hour. He tried for the sake of his family, for the sake of the mortgage, for the sake of college for the children. But you can't explain this to a teenager who sees only an empty table and parents who barely speak. "Where is Noah?" he asked, changing the subject. "Sleeping, as always." Alexa pointed at the screen, sending another message. "He played his stupid game until midnight yesterday. Again this Minecraft, or whatever it is. Go wake him up. School is in an hour." "Why me?" She finally looked at him, her dark eyes sparkling. "You're at home, so wake me up." "Alexa," Thomas began, but stopped. Arguing with her was like banging your head against a wall. "Okay, I'll do it myself." He walked past her, feeling her gaze boring into his back. The stairs creaked under his steps. Noah's room was dark, the blinds were drawn, and the air smelled of plastic from the pile of Legos on the table. 12-year-old Noah lay buried in his pillow, his blonde hair sticking out in all directions. Thomas sat down on the edge of the bed and gently shook his shoulder. "Noah, get up. It's time to go to school." The boy muttered something unintelligible, but opened his eyes. "Already?" His voice was sleepy, but there was anxiety in it. "Is Mom home?" "She left for work." Thomas tried to smile. "Come on, I'll make you some toast. With peanut butter, as you like." Noah nodded, but his eyes were glued to the ceiling. He was not like Alexa. He did not argue, did not snap. But Thomas knew that his son noticed everything: quarrels, silence, an empty table in the morning. Noah just kept it to himself, and it made Thomas feel even worse. Returning to the kitchen, he found that Alexa had already gone into the living room, buried in her phone on the sofa. Thomas turned on the toaster, feeling the silence weigh on him. He wanted to talk to the children, ask how things were at school, what was new with them. But the words got stuck in my throat. He was too tired, too exhausted to find the right phrases. "Dad," Alexa called from the living room, her voice unexpectedly soft. "Will you come to my performance on Friday? This is for the school art club. I drew something cool." Thomas froze, the toaster clicked, releasing the bread. "On Friday?" He mentally ran through the schedule. Night shift. Again. "I'll try Lex. But you know how it is with my work." She didn't answer, but the silence from the living room spoke louder than words. Thomas closed his eyes, feeling something tighten in his chest. He wanted to be there, wanted to see her drawings, wanted to be the father she deserved. But work always came first. Noah walked down to the kitchen, his backpack dragging along the floor. "Where is Mom?" he asked quietly, sitting down at the table. I said, "At work." Thomas put the peanut butter toast in front of him. "Eat, otherwise you'll be late." Noah nodded but didn't touch his food. He looked at the toast as if it could answer the questions he didn't dare ask. Thomas wanted to say something encouraging, but the phone in his pocket vibrated. Message from a partner. "Tom, in the morning we will analyze the night. Don't be late." He looked at Noah, then at the empty chair where Olivia usually sat. "Everything will be fine, son," he said, but the words sounded unconvincing, even for himself. When the children went to school, Thomas was left alone in the house. He poured himself some coffee, but it was already cold. Sitting at the empty table, he tried to remember the last time he and Olivia had a normal conversation. Not about bills, not about schedules, but just, like husband and wife. He couldn't remember, and it scared him more than he was willing to admit. The emergency room at Seattle's largest hospital was buzzing, even in the early morning hours. The smell of antiseptic mixed with the aroma of cheap coffee from the machine, and the bells of monitors and the hurried steps of medical staff could be heard in the corridors. Olivia Hill, the head nurse, had just finished a shift that had lasted almost 14 hours. Her uniform was slightly wrinkled, there were shadows under her eyes, but her movements remained clear and professional. She was standing at the front desk, filling out a report on the latest patient, a young guy with a broken bone after a motorcycle accident. Olivia, are you still here? A voice came from behind her. She turned around and saw James Reeves, a paramedic from their department. At 35, he looked younger, blonde hair, slightly disheveled, blue eyes with a slight sparkle, and a smile that seemed to be able to diffuse a tense situation. He was wearing a dark blue paramedic uniform and was holding a plastic cup of coffee in his hands. I just finished, Olivia replied, closing the folder with a report. And you? Didn't your shift end an hour ago? Technically, yes, James shrugged, leaning against the counter. But someone should have helped that guy from the emergency room. Did you see how he joked while his bones were being set? Steel type. Olivia smiled for the first time that morning. Yes, he's great. Not everyone can handle 3 broken ribs like that. That's for sure. James took a sip of coffee, looking at her over the top of the glass. How are you holding up? You look like you're ready to fall right here. She rolled her eyes, but the corners of her lips twitched. Thanks for the compliment. Just a long night, and the morning is no better. Tell. He nodded towards the cafeteria at the end of the corridor. I have about 15 minutes until the next car arrives. Let's go, get some normal coffee, not this mess from the machine. Olivia hesitated. She needed to go home, shower, sleep, maybe at least a couple of hours with the kids before Thomas returned from work. But the cafeteria was only a stone's throw away, and the thought of talking to someone who wouldn't be silent or grumble seemed tempting. Okay, she said, but only for 5 minutes. I'm really exhausted. The hospital cafeteria was almost empty, save for a couple of residents glued to their laptops and a janitor lazily mopping the floor. Olivia and James sat at a table near the window, through which they could see the parking lot and the gray sky of Seattle. She was holding a cup of latte in her hands, warm, but not drinking yet. James, on the other hand, had already finished half his espresso. So, he began, leaning back in his chair, what kind of morning is it that you look like you're ready to quit? Olivia snorted, but her gaze slid to the window. Nothing special, just everything at once. The shift was hellish, the house was a mess, the children. She fell silent, twirling the cup in her hands. Doesn't matter. Ordinary life. Doesn't sound like never mind. James leaned a little closer, his voice becoming softer. Come on, Olivia. You know I know how to listen. What's happened? She looked at him, and for a second her defenses cracked. His eyes were so open, so understanding. Not like Thomas, who lately has either been silent or asked questions as if under pressure. I'm just tired, she said finally, tired of being torn apart. Work, home, children, and Tom. She stopped short, as if she had said more than she wanted. Volume. James raised an eyebrow, but his tone remained light. Is your husband a policeman? What's wrong with him? Olivia sighed, looking away. He's good. Is it true? But he's always at work. Night shifts, overtime. When he is at home, it is as if he is not here. And I just can't do everything alone. James nodded without interrupting. He knew how to remain silent in such a way that it did not irritate, but, on the contrary, pushed him to talk further. Olivia felt the words come out. I didn't even have time to make breakfast this morning. Alexa is probably mad at me again. And Noah, he's so quiet, but I can see that he notices everything. And I can't do anything about it. Hey, James said quietly, you do more than most. You work here, where every day is like war, and you also support your family. This is not a joke. She smiled faintly. Sometimes it seems like I'm holding nothing. Everything is falling apart. Doesn't fall apart. He looked into her eyes, and firmness appeared in his voice. You are strong, Olivia, stronger than you think. And if something is wrong at home, maybe it's not your fault. Maybe someone else should step up. She froze, feeling his words settle somewhere inside her. Someone else. Thomas. She knew James was right, but it hurt to think about it. Maybe, she muttered, taking a sip of coffee. It was too bitter, or so it seemed to her. Listen, James smiled, returning lightness to the conversation. When things get really bad, call me. I know a great taco place downtown. No talk about work, just food and stupid jokes. I promise you will feel better. Olivia laughed for the first time that day, and the sound surprised her. Taco? Seriously? Are you always so optimistic? Yeah, this is my secret to survival. He winked, finishing his coffee. Think about it. I'm serious. She shook her head, but the smile remained. Let's see. But for now, I just need sleep. Agreed. James stood up, throwing the empty glass into the trash. Go rest, heroine. Otherwise you will fall, and then who will save the world? Go already, she replied, waving her hand, but her voice was warmer than she expected. He left, and Olivia remained sitting, looking into the cup. Her heart was beating a little faster than it should. It was just a conversation, just coffee. Nothing like that. But why then did she feel better, for the first time in a long time? At home, in the evening, Olivia was sitting on the sofa, wrapped in a blanket. The kids were in their rooms. Alexa was listening to music on her headphones. Noah was building something out of Legos. Thomas hasn't returned yet another shift. The house was quiet, but this silence seemed heavy, like before a thunderstorm. Her phone lay on the armrest. The screen lit up. Message. Olivia picked up the phone and her breath hitched. James. Thank you for listening today. You're awesome, Olivia. If anything happens, I'm in touch. Good night. She stared at the text, feeling a warmth spread through her chest. It was just a message, nothing special. But her fingers froze above the screen. She knew she had to respond with something neutral, or don't answer at all. But instead, she opened the chat, hesitated, and hit delete. The screen went dark. Olivia put her phone down, her eyes falling on the family photo on the shelf her and Thomas, Alexa, and Noah on the beach 2 years ago. Everyone laughed. She couldn't remember the last time she saw Thomas happy. She stood up, putting away the blanket, and went to check on the children. But something stirred in the depths of her soul, a small, dangerous light that she was not yet ready to acknowledge. The sun had already set, and Hill's home in suburban Seattle was bathed in the soft light of street lamps filtering through the large living room windows. The inside smelled of pizza ordered for dinner and something vaguely musty, maybe old carpets that were long overdue for replacement. The kitchen, usually the center of family life, seemed too quiet today, despite the clinking of dishes and the occasional voice. Thomas Hill sat at the dinner table, still in his police uniform, although his shirt buttons were undone and his boots were off. His dark eyes scanned the pile of papers, electric bills, an advertisement for a construction company, a piece of paper with notes on the bathroom renovation he had been planning for 6 months. Olivia entered the kitchen, her movements tired but precise, like someone accustomed to working under pressure. She had just returned from the hospital, having changed from her uniform to jeans and a loose t-shirt. Her reddish hair was down, but it looked like she hadn't looked in the mirror all day. She placed the empty pizza box in the trash and looked at Thomas. "Have you eaten?" she asked, opening the refrigerator. Her voice was smooth, but without warmth. "Yes, I took a couple of pieces," Thomas answered, without looking up from his papers. "Have the children eaten?" Alexa swallowed something and went to her room. Noah is still fiddling with the pizza in the living room. Olivia took out a bottle of water, took a sip, and leaned against the countertop. "What do you have?" Thomas picked up a piece of paper with the logo of a construction company. "I was wondering about repairs. The bathtub is leaking, and the tiles are falling off. I think we should finally get started. Maybe next week I'll call a technician." Olivia nodded, but her gaze was distracted. "Fine. Just tell us in advance how much it will cost." "Already said it. About 3,000 if there are no surprises." Thomas looked at her, expecting at least some kind of reaction. "If we pull it, we can also change the kitchen faucet. He is also on his last legs." "We'll pull," she answered, but her tone was dry, almost indifferent. "But I'm not in the mood to discuss this right now, Tom." I had a shift. She fell silent, taking another sip of water. "I'm just exhausted." Thomas clenched his jaw, but tried to speak calmly. I understand, Olivia. I'm not having an easy day either, but this needs to be decided. If the tap completely closes, we will be left without water. Then decide, she said, putting the bottle on the table a little more abruptly than necessary. You are our master planner. He looked at her, feeling irritation boiling in his chest. I'm trying, Olivia, but this is not only my concern. Do we live together or what? She opened her mouth to answer, but Alexa walked into the kitchen. Her black hair with purple streaks was tied into a messy ponytail, and she had headphones in her ears, from which muffled music could be heard. She glanced at her parents, then at the empty pizza box. Seriously? She said, crossing her arms. There's not even a proper dinner. I thought, at least today, we'll eat like people. Pizza is not food. Thomas raised an eyebrow, trying to diffuse the situation. You adore her. Pizza is when you're too lazy to cook, Alexa retorted, opening the refrigerator. Mom, you promised to make those burritos like last time. Olivia sighed, her shoulders slumping. Lex, I just got home from work. I didn't have time to prepare anything. I'll do it tomorrow, okay? Tomorrow, Alexa muttered, taking out the yogurt. Always tomorrow. She turned to her father. And you, Dad, don't count at all. You didn't even know I had a performance today. Thomas froze, his hand with the piece of paper dropped to the table. Performance? What performance? Art club, Alexa said, her voice trembling with resentment. I told you. My drawings were exhibited in the assembly hall. All the parents were there except you. Lex, Thomas ran his hand over his face, feeling the fatigue rolling in like a wave. I had a shift. You know I can't just quit my job. I know, she snapped. You are always at work, and Mom is always in the hospital. Maybe I should live alone since you don't care about me. Alexa, that's enough, Olivia said sharply, but her voice was more tired than stern. Nobody gave a damn about you. We're just busy. Busy, Alexa repeated, her eyes sparkling. Cool. So I should just wait until you find time. Thomas wanted to answer, but noticed Noah standing quietly in the doorway. His blonde hair was disheveled, and he was clutching an empty pizza plate. The 12-year-old boy looked like he wanted to become invisible. His gaze darted between his parents and his sister, and Thomas felt a pang of guilt. Noah was always like this, quiet, reserved, but he saw everything. Noah, have you eaten? Thomas asked, trying to speak softly. Yeah, Noah muttered, looking down. Can I go to my place? Go, Olivia said, her voice softening. Just put the dishes in the sink. Noah nodded and quickly walked over to the sink, trying not to look at Alexa, who was still glaring at her parents. When he was gone, Thomas turned to his daughter. Lex, I really regret the performance. Tell me how it went. Did you like your drawings? Are you interested now? She snorted, but answered anyway. It was cool. My sketch with a wolf took second place. The teacher said that I could submit it to the city exhibition. This is great. Thomas smiled, but the smile came out strained. I will definitely come to the next one. I promise. You promise, Alexa repeated, and there was no trust in her voice. Like when you promised to go to the concert last year, or to a parent meeting. Alexa, that's enough, Olivia intervened, her tone becoming harsher. We do what we can. Not everything revolves around you. Who's around then? Alexa blurted out. Because it's definitely not around Noah and me. You don't even speak normally. There was silence. Thomas looked at Olivia, expecting her to say something, but she just turned away, staring out the window. Her silence was more eloquent than any words. Alexa grabbed the yogurt and headed towards the stairs. Good night, she said without turning around. Her steps echoed loudly on the stairs. Thomas leaned back in his chair, feeling the tension in the room become almost palpable. He wanted to return to the conversation about repairs, but the words got stuck in his throat. Instead, he tried to change the subject. Listen, Olivia, what about the vacation? Maybe we can go somewhere in August, to Lake Tahoe like before. Olivia turned slowly, her gaze blank. Vacation? Tom, I don't know how to make it to the end of the week. What vacation? I just thought. He began, but she interrupted. Have you thought about it? When was the last time you thought about how I feel? Her voice trembled, but she quickly pulled herself together. I am going to sleep. I have an early shift tomorrow. She left, leaving Thomas alone at the table. He looked at the scattered papers, at the half-drunk bottle of water, at the empty pizza box. The house that had once been their refuge now seemed alien. He heard the door slam upstairs as Olivia locked herself in the bedroom. Somewhere in the depths of Noah's house turned on his gaming console, and Alexa was probably looking at her phone. Thomas stood up, putting the dishes away in the sink. He tried not to think about how everything had gone wrong. But Alexa's words echoed in her head. You don't even talk normally. He knew she was right, and it scared him more than he could admit. The downtown Seattle police station was noisy even in the morning hours. The smell of stale coffee and printer toner permeated the air, and the hallways buzzed with the voices of officers discussing late-night calls. Thomas Hill sat at his desk in the briefing room, his uniform pressed, but his eyes shadowed from lack of sleep. He had a notepad in front of him with notes on his latest case, a burglary in the Capitol Hill area, but his eyes kept wandering to the phone next to him. The screen was blank. Olivia had not written since the morning, although she usually sent at least a short message. At home, everything is okay. He was 40, and years of police service had taught him to notice details. A pulled curtain, a shoe print, a nervous tick in a suspect. But now those skills have turned against him. He noticed changes in Olivia, little things that weren't noticeable before. She began returning later, citing extra hours at the hospital. Her phone, which used to lie open on the kitchen table, was now always with her, and she checked it too often, furtively, as if she was afraid that someone would see. And also her voice, it became colder, more distant, even when she smiled at the children. Hill, are you with us? Sergeant Martinez's voice pulled Thomas out of his thoughts. She stood at the board, pointing to a map of the area where the theft occurred. Her dark hair was pulled back into a tight bun, and her eyes were as sharp as ever. This is the third time I've asked you what you think about the witness on camera. Thomas blinked, straightening up in his chair. Sorry, Martha. The witness. The guy in the hoodie? He glanced at the notebook, trying to remember the details. The camera didn't capture him well. The face is not visible, but the gait is confident. Maybe not the first time. Martinez narrowed her eyes, but nodded. Right. But today you are hovering somewhere. Everything is fine. Yes, okay, he answered too quickly, looking away. It was just a hard night. Yet it's like we have lungs, chuckled his partner, Officer Danny Corso, who was sitting next to him. Danny, a burly guy of about 30 with short hair and a perpetual grin, nudged Thomas with his elbow. What, is Alexa pestering you again, or did Noah play his own games? Thomas forced himself to smile. Something like that. Teenagers, you understand. Oh, I'm not jealous, Danny said, leaning back in his chair. My little brother was a nightmare at 15. He kept yelling that his parents don't understand him. And your Alexa seems to have the same character. That's true, Thomas muttered, but his thoughts were far away. He remembered last night, Alexa slamming the door, Noah hiding his gaze, and Olivia not even trying to smooth over the quarrel. And then, at night, he heard her typing something on her phone while lying in bed. When he asked who she was texting with, she muttered, work colleague, and turned to the wall. Hill, Martinez called again, now with slight irritation. If you're not in, tell me right away. I need everyone 100%, especially with this case. The store owner yells that we don't do a damn thing. I'm in, Thomas said, raising his hand in a conciliatory gesture. Just give me a minute, okay? I'll get ready. She looked at him doubtfully, but nodded. Okay, but if something is wrong, speak up. You know how it works. Thomas nodded, but had no intention of saying anything. How could he explain that his marriage seemed to be falling apart at the seams? That he doesn't sleep at night, replaying Olivia's every word, her every look in his head? That he's afraid to ask her directly because the answer might ruin everything? "I'll go get some coffee," he said, getting up. "Anyone want one?" "Only if you find something better than this drink," Danny chuckled, nodding toward the coffee machine in the corner. "Seriously, Tom, you're as pale as a ghost. Maybe you should take a day off?" "I'm fine," Thomas snapped, heading towards the door. But as he stepped out into the corridor, he felt the phone vibrate in his pocket. He pulled it out, hoping to see a message from Olivia, but it was just spam from an online store. He cursed under his breath and put the phone back. In the evening, Thomas decided to pick up Olivia at the hospital. Her shift was supposed to end at 6, and he thought this was a chance to talk without the kids, without arguing. Maybe if they spent a little time together, she'd stop being so distant. He parked his Ford in the parking lot outside the hospital's main entrance, turned off the engine, and leaned back in his seat, looking out at the glass doors. People came and went. Doctors in white coats, patients with bandages, a couple of orderlies smoking by the trash can. Olivia was not there. He looked at his watch, 6:15. She was late. Usually she wrote if she was late, but today nothing. Thomas tapped his fingers on the steering wheel, feeling his irritation turn to worry. He dialed her number, but after 3 rings the voicemail started. "Damn it, Olivia," he muttered, throwing the phone onto the passenger seat. And then he saw her. She walked out of the hospital doors, her reddish hair shining under the light of the lantern. She was wearing jeans and a light jacket, with a bag hanging over her shoulder. But she was not alone. A man walked nearby, tall, fair-haired, wearing a dark paramedic uniform. They stopped at the edge of the parking lot, and Olivia threw her head back and laughed. Her smile was bright, vibrant, something Thomas hadn't seen in months, maybe years. The man Thomas didn't know his name, but his face seemed familiar, said something, and Olivia smiled again, touching his hand. It was a small gesture, almost accidental, but Thomas felt his insides tighten. He knew that look, that lightness in her movements. She used to look at him like that. "Who the hell are you?" Thomas muttered, leaning closer to the windshield. He tensed, trying to make out the man's face. They were too far away to hear what they were saying, but their animated conversation was obvious. The man took out his phone, showed Olivia the screen, and she laughed again, covering her mouth with her hand. Thomas gripped the steering wheel until his knuckles turned white. He wanted to go out, come over, ask what was going on. But something stopped him, fear that the truth would be worse than his suspicions. Instead, he watched as Olivia and the man went to the car. She opened the door and threw her bag into the back seat. As the Honda pulled out of the parking lot, Thomas remained seated, staring into space. His heart was pounding, and the same question was spinning in his head: who is this guy, and why is Olivia smiling at him in a way she hasn't smiled at home for a long time? He started the engine. Night had fallen over the Seattle suburbs, and the Hill House seemed like an island of silence in a sea of streetlights and distant traffic noise. It was dark inside, except for the soft glow of the table lamp in the living room, where Thomas Hill sat on the sofa, staring at the muted television. His police uniform was casually thrown onto a chair, and he was left in a t-shirt and jeans. There was a bottle of beer on the coffee table, half empty, although he had barely touched it. My thoughts revolved around the same thing. Olivia, her smile in the parking lot, that guy in the paramedic uniform. The picture did not leave his head, and every time he closed his eyes, it became brighter, sharper, more painful. It was already past midnight. The kids were long asleep. Alexa, probably with her headphones on, glued to her phone, and Noah curled up under the covers next to his Lego. Olivia returned home around 9, citing a long shift. She ate alone in the kitchen, hardly speaking, and went upstairs, saying, "I'm going to take a shower." Thomas waited for her to come down, but she didn't come down. Instead, he heard the bedroom door creak open and the lights in the hallway go out. He couldn't remain silent any longer. The question he had been suppressing all day burned in his throat, demanding an outlet. He knew it could ruin everything, but not asking was even worse. Thomas stood up, feeling fatigue and tension merge into a heavy lump in his chest. He walked up the stairs, trying to walk quietly so as not to wake the children. The door to the bedroom was ajar, and the faint light of the bedside lamp was shining through the crack. Olivia was sitting on the bed, already in her pajamas, an old t-shirt, and shorts. Her hair, still damp from the shower, fell over her shoulders. She was scrolling through something on her phone, but when she saw Thomas, she quickly locked the screen and put it on the nightstand. Her gaze was wary, almost defensive. "Are you still awake?" she asked. Her voice was quiet, but there was a sense of fatigue in it. "Tomorrow you have an early shift." "I can't sleep," Thomas answered, leaning against the door frame. He looked at her, trying to find something familiar in her face, something that would remind him of Olivia, whom he loved. But all he saw were tense shoulders and an evasive gaze. "We need to talk." Olivia sighed, leaning back against her pillows. "Tom, I'm exhausted. Not today, okay? Come on tomorrow." "No, now." His voice was firmer than he expected. He stepped into the room, closing the door behind him. "This is important." She looked at him, her eyes narrowed. "What's happened? You've been kind of strange all day. Is it because of work?" "Not because of work." Thomas crossed his arms, feeling his heart pounding. He took a deep breath, gathering his courage. "Olivia, are you cheating on me?" Silence fell, so heavy that it seemed as if the air in the room had become denser. Olivia froze, her face went pale, but after a second she straightened up. Her gaze became sharp, almost furious. "What?" she asked, her voice trembling with indignation. "Are you serious? Did you really say that?" "Answer the question," Thomas said, trying to keep his voice even, although everything was boiling inside. "I'm not blind, Olivia. You come back late, always with your phone, and today—" He fell silent, remembering her smile in the parking lot. "I saw you with him." "With whom?" She jumped out of bed, her hands clenched into fists. "What are you talking about, Tom?" "With that guy, paramedic, in the hospital parking lot." His voice became louder, despite his attempts to restrain himself. "You looked happy. It feels like you haven't looked at home for a long time." Olivia stared at him, her lips twitching. For a second, she thought she was going to scream, but instead she laughed, a short, bitter laugh. "Were you following me?" "God, Tom, this is paranoia." "I wasn't paying attention," he snapped, feeling her words hitting his nerves. "I came to pick you up. I wanted to make a surprise, but instead I saw you flirting with some guy." "Are you flirting?" She stepped towards him, her eyes sparkling. "Do you really think I have the time or energy for this? I work 14 hours, Tom. I save people. What am I doing at home? Another shift cooking, cleaning, children. And you dare accuse me of treason?" "Then explain," he said, his voice becoming lower, but there was steel in it. "Explain why you smile at him and not at me. Why are you always with this phone, as if you are hiding something? Why are you moving away, Olivia?" "Because I'm tired," she shouted, her voice breaking. "I'm tired of being invisible in this house. Have you ever asked me how I feel? No, it's easier for you to suspect me of something than to admit that you can't cope on your own." "Can't cope?" Thomas stepped closer, his face a few inches from hers. "I'm working so that this house doesn't fall apart, so that children have a future. And you can't even talk to me normally, because you don't listen." She turned away, her hands trembling. "You only see what you want to see. And I'm just trying to survive, Tom." He looked at her, feeling the words get stuck in his throat. He wanted to believe her. He wanted it to be just fatigue, just a quarrel. But the image of her smile in the parking lot did not let go. "If it's just tiredness," he said quietly, "why can't you look me in the eyes and say there's nothing?" Olivia froze, her breathing became heavy. She slowly turned around, her gaze full of pain and anger. "Because you don't trust me," she said, every word like a blow. "And this is worse than any betrayal." "Olivia," he began, but she raised her hand to stop him. "Enough. I don't want to discuss this." She walked over to the bed, grabbed a pillow, and threw it on the floor. "Sleep on the sofa if it makes you feel better." Thomas watched as she crawled under the covers, turning her back to him. Her shoulders were tense, but she wasn't crying, or at least she didn't show it. He wanted to say something, to apologize, to start over, but the words seemed empty. Instead, he silently left the room, closing the door as quietly as he could. In the living room, he collapsed on the sofa without undressing. The bottle of beer was still standing on the table, but he did not touch her. Instead, he stared at the ceiling, listening to the silence of the house pressing down on him. Somewhere upstairs, a floorboard creaked. Maybe Noah was getting up to go to the toilet. Maybe Alexa was tossing and turning in her sleep. But Olivia's bedroom remained silent as the grave. He closed his eyes, but sleep did not come. The question he'd asked was still hanging in the air, and her answer or lack thereof was worse than he'd expected. She didn't say no. And that scared him most of all. The morning at the Hill House began with gray light filtering through the kitchen blinds. The air was cool, with a slight smell of coffee that no one drank, and yesterday's pizza, the box of which was still lying on the table. The kitchen, usually a place for quick breakfasts and occasional family conversations, today seemed too small for the emotions that were seething within it. Thomas Hill stood at the sink, clutching an empty mug. His eyes were red from a sleepless night on the couch, and the t-shirt he slept in was wrinkled. Across from the tabletop, Olivia Hill was tying her hair into a tight bun, her movements abrupt, almost violent. She had already put on her medical uniform, preparing for her next shift at the hospital. The silence between them was heavy, like before a thunderstorm. After yesterday's conversation, or rather quarrel, they had not exchanged even a few words. Thomas wanted to apologize, to start over, but her evasiveness and his own suspicions kept him at a distance. Olivia, it seemed, was also not eager to make peace. Her gaze was cold, and her lips were tightly compressed. "Are you going to be silent all day?" Thomas finally said, placing the mug on the table with a light knock. His voice was hoarse, but there was determination in it. "Or should we still talk about what's going on?" Olivia froze, her hands stopping halfway to her bag. She turned slowly, her eyes narrowed. "Shall we talk?" she asked, her tone as sharp as a blade. "It was you who accused me of treason yesterday, Tom. What else do you want to discuss? Maybe I should now be accountable for every step." "That's not what I meant," he said, trying to control himself. "But you didn't answer my question, Olivia. You just walked away from the conversation. And I can't live like this, not knowing what's going on." "Can't live like this?" She stepped closer. Her voice became louder. "How do you think I live? Instead of helping, you are interrogating." "Help?" Thomas raised his voice, unable to stand it. "I work so we can pay for this house, for school, for everything. And you can't even tell who you're chatting with in the parking lot, laughing like everything's fine." "Oh, this parking lot again." Olivia threw her bag on the table, her cheeks turning red with anger. "It was a colleague, Tom, a colleague I work with every day. Do you really think I have time for anything else? Then why are you hiding your phone?" He blurted out, feeling the suspicions that had been accumulating for days bursting out. "Why don't you look me in the eyes? Why are you so distant, Olivia?" "Because I'm tired," she shouted, her voice echoing off the kitchen walls. "I'm tired of you, of this house, of everything. I can't pretend everything is normal anymore." Thomas froze, her words hitting him like a slap in the face. He opened his mouth to answer, but then he noticed movement in the doorway. Alexa stood in the doorway, her black hair with purple streaks disheveled and her eyes wide. She had clearly just woken up, but her face was tense, as if she had heard more than she wanted. "Why are you yelling?" she said, her voice trembling with a mixture of anger and fear. "Do you even know that Noah is hiding in the room right now? He thinks you're getting a divorce." Olivia turned to her daughter, her face softening, but only for a second. "Lex, go to your room. It's none of your business." "Not mine." Alexa stepped into the kitchen, her hands clenched into fists. "This is my home, and my brother, who is afraid that you will leave him. Why can't you just talk normally?" "Alexa, that's enough," Thomas said, trying to speak calmly, but his voice was shaking. "We were just discussing something. Go to Noah, please." "Are you discussing?" She snorted, her eyes sparkling. "This is not a discussion. This is a war. You don't even notice how bad Noah and I are. Watch your language, Olivia said sharply, but her voice was more tired than stern. And don't interfere. This is adult stuff. Adults? Alexa almost screamed. You are acting like children. Dad, you're always at work. Mom, you're always angry. Are Noah and I just furniture in this house? Thomas felt something tighten in his chest. He wanted to hug her, tell her that everything would be fine, but the words got stuck in his throat. He looked at Olivia, hoping she would say something to calm her daughter down, but Olivia just looked away, her hands shaking. Maybe we should live separately, Olivia suddenly said. Her voice was quiet, but every word fell like a stone. Maybe it will be better this way. For everyone. Thomas stared at her, his breathing stopping. What? He asked again, not believing his ears. Are you serious? Olivia didn't answer. Her eyes were glued to the floor. But her silence was more eloquent than words. Alexa gasped, her eyes filling with tears. Mom, do you want to leave? The girl's voice broke. Are you going to leave us? Lex, I don't. Olivia began, but Alexa didn't let her finish. You are selfish, she shouted, her voice trembling. You only think about yourself, and Noah, and me? Enough, Thomas said quietly. Olivia, did you really say that? Live separately. Olivia finally looked at him, her eyes full of pain, but also determined. I don't know, Tom, she said quietly. I can't do this anymore. I'm suffocating. Are you suffocating? He took a step towards her, his voice becoming louder. What about the children? What about us? Are you just going to pick it up and leave? I haven't decided anything, she shouted back, her voice breaking. But I can't pretend that everything is fine when it's not. Alexa turned and ran out of the kitchen, her steps echoing on the stairs. Thomas heard the door to her room slam. He looked at Olivia, feeling the world crumble beneath his feet. Are you serious? He asked, his voice almost a whisper. Do you really want to leave? Olivia was silent, her hands clenched into fists. Finally, she said, I don't know, Tom, but I can't continue like this. He looked at her, trying to find words, but there were none. Instead, he grabbed the keys from the table and headed for the door. I need a shift, he said without turning around. Tom, wait. Olivia began, but he had already left, slamming the door. The sound echoed through the house and Olivia was left alone in the kitchen, her breathing heavy and her eyes shiny with tears she didn't want to let go. Upstairs in his room, Noah sat on the bed with his knees pulled to his chest. He heard screams, heard Alexa run out, heard the entrance slam door. His room was littered with Legos, but he didn't touch them now. Instead, he looked at the photo on the nightstand, the whole family at the lake 2 years ago. Mom laughed, Dad hugged her, and he and Alexa built a sand castle. He didn't understand why everything had changed, but the fear that his mother would leave forever squeezed his heart. Alexa, locked in her room, turned on the music at full volume, but even she could not drown out her thoughts. She hated them, both of them. Dad because he is always away, Mom because she wants to leave them. But most of all, she hated herself because she couldn't do anything about it. Thomas drove to the station, his hands gripping the steering wheel until his knuckles turned white. Olivia's words were spinning in her head, live separately. The hospital parking lot was almost empty, except for a few staff cars and a lone supermarket cart abandoned by a streetlight. Thomas Hill sat in his Ford, parked in the far corner overlooking the main entrance. His fingers tapped the steering wheel and his eyes were glued to the glass doors. He had come straight from work without changing clothes, and his police uniform seemed too tight, as if it was pressing on his chest. Today, he decided to pick Olivia up after her shift to have an honest conversation, no children, no quarrels, no distractions. After her words in the morning that they might need to live separately, he couldn't put it off any longer. He needed to know the truth. The clock on the dashboard showed 18:23. Olivia's shift was supposed to end at 6, but she was already late. Thomas took out his phone to text her, but decided against it. Instead, he leaned back in his seat, trying to calm his breathing. Scraps of their morning quarrel were spinning in my head. Her scream, Alexa's tears, the quiet fear in Noah's eyes. And her words, "Maybe we should live separately," are like a knife stuck in her chest. He still hoped it was just a temper tantrum, that they could make things right. But this required an honest conversation. "Come on, Olivia," he muttered, looking at the doors. "Come out already." It was tense at the precinct today. Danny, his partner, had been trying to get him to talk all day, noticing that Thomas was out of action. "What's wrong with you, Hill? Are there problems at home again?" he asked at lunch, picking at his sandwich. Thomas waved it off, muttering, "It's okay, Dan. Just tired." But Danny didn't lag behind. "Tired, yeah," he chuckled, chewing. "You look like you've been run over by a truck." "Seriously, Tom, if something is wrong, tell me. I'm not a stranger." "Appreciate it," Thomas replied, looking into his coffee cup. "But this is personal. I'll figure it out." "Personal," Danny repeated, narrowing his eyes. "This is about Olivia, right? You and she have been married for 100 years. What, did you have a fight?" "Something like that," Thomas said, feeling his throat tighten. "Nothing serious. Just life." "Life," Danny snorted. "I know this life. My sister and her husband started out the same way, nothing serious, and then bam, divorce. Don't wait, Tom. Talk to her. Women love to be listened to." "Yes, I'm trying," Thomas snapped, but immediately regretted his harshness. "Okay, Dan, thank you. I'll figure it out." "I hope so," Danny said, clapping him on the shoulder. "Otherwise, you're already walking around like a zombie. While still on patrol, you'll start to have your head in the clouds, and that's it." Talking to Danny only strengthened Thomas' resolve. He didn't want to be the guy who hangs around until it all falls apart. That's why he's here in the parking lot, waiting for Olivia so he can take her home and finally figure out what's going on. He even called his neighbor, Mrs. Clark, asking him to keep an eye on Alexa and Noah so he and Olivia would have time to talk on the way. The hospital doors opened and Thomas stood up straight. But it wasn't Olivia, some doctor in a white coat, talking on the phone. Thomas cursed under his breath and sat back in his seat. The minutes dragged on, and with each of them his confidence dwindled. What if she's late again? What if she doesn't want to talk at all? And then he saw her. Olivia walked out the door, her reddish hair pulled back into a messy bun and holding a bag in her hands. She was wearing jeans and a light jacket and had a smile on her face, the same one he saw in the parking lot last time. But she was not alone. Walking next to him was the same guy, blonde, in a paramedic uniform with a slight grin. They were talking about something, and Olivia was laughing, her hand lightly touching his elbow. Thomas felt the blood rush to his face. He gripped the steering wheel, his breathing became heavy. This was not just a colleague, it was something more. He watched them walk to the other side of the parking lot, towards a black pickup truck parked at the edge. Olivia opened the passenger door and sat down as if this was a normal thing. The paramedic took the seat behind the wheel and the car drove off. "What the hell?" Thomas muttered, his voice shaking with a mixture of anger and disbelief. He started the engine without thinking and drove out behind the pickup truck. His heart was pounding, and one question was swirling in his head. Where were they going? And why didn't she say she wasn't going home? The pickup drove through the streets of Seattle, and Thomas kept his distance, trying not to attract attention. He knew it was crazy to follow his own wife like a suspect, but he couldn't stop. Every turn, every traffic light only increased his suspicions. He remembered her words in the morning, "I'm suffocating." And now I saw her sitting in someone else's car, laughing as if there was nothing keeping her at home. 10 minutes later, the pickup stopped at an apartment building in the Fremont neighborhood, not too far from the hospital, but close enough that Thomas had never been here before. He parked across the street, in the shade, and watched Olivia and the paramedic get out of the car. They were talking about something again, and Olivia nodded, her smile soft, almost tender. The paramedic opened the entrance door, and they went inside. Thomas sat motionless, his hands still gripping the steering wheel. He expected her to come out in a minute, that it was just, what, friendly visit, but the minutes passed and nothing happened. The light came on in one of the windows on the third floor, and he saw silhouettes, two people standing close to each other. "No," he whispered, his voice hoarse. "No, Olivia, you couldn't." He wanted to believe that he was wrong, that it was just his imagination. But the facts were in front of him. She left with this guy, entered his apartment, and there was no report or overtime shift. It was not fatigue, not quarrels. It was treason. He leaned back in his seat, feeling like the world was falling apart. Everything he believed in their marriage, their family, their promises turned out to be an illusion. He didn't know how long he sat there, looking at the lighted window. Maybe an hour, maybe two. But when he finally started the engine and drove home, there was an emptiness in his chest that he couldn't explain. The night in the Hill House was dark and heavy, as if the air itself was saturated with tension. The living room was lit only by the dim light of a table lamp, which cast long shadows on the walls. Thomas Hill sat on the sofa, his hands gripping the armrests, and his eyes were glued to the front door. There was an empty bottle of beer on the coffee table, but he did not feel intoxicated, only cold, ringing rage and pain that tore through his chest. The clock on the wall struck midnight when he heard the sound of a car approaching. Headlights flashed through the window and the engine stopped. Thomas sat up straighter, his heart beating faster. The door opened and Olivia entered. Her reddish hair was slightly disheveled, her jacket casually thrown over her shoulders. She stopped in the hallway, noticing Thomas, and her face tensed. "Are you still awake?" she asked. Her voice was quiet, but there was a sense of wariness in it. She put her bag on the floor and took off her jacket, avoiding his gaze. "Where have you been?" Thomas said, his voice low, almost menacing. He stood up, his figure appearing larger in the dim living room. Olivia froze, her hand lingering on her jacket hook. "I was delayed," she answered, finally looking at him. "There was a blockage in the hospital. I had to finish the reports." "Reports?" Thomas stepped closer, his eyes narrowed. "Don't lie to me, Olivia. I know where you've been." Her face turned pale, but she quickly pulled herself together. "What are you talking about?" she asked, her tone sharper. "Are you on your own again? Are you following me?" "I wasn't watching," he snapped, his voice trembling with barely contained rage. "I came for you. I wanted to pick you up and talk. But you left with him, with that guy. I saw you enter his apartment, Olivia. In Fremont. Don't deny it." Olivia opened her mouth, but the words stuck. Her eyes widened, and for a second she looked like a hunted animal. Were you following me?" she whispered, her voice filled with disbelief. "Lord Tom, this is too much." "Too much?" He raised his voice, his hands clenched into fists. "Is that what you call too much? You leave with some guy, go to his house, and I have to just sit and wait? Should I say that everything is fine?" Olivia looked at him, her breathing heavy. She turned away, her hands shaking, but then she slowly turned back, and there was something new in her eyes, a mixture of guilt and determination. "Okay," she said quietly. "Do you want the truth? Yes, I was with James, and yes, we have a relationship." Olivia pursed her lips but nodded, her gaze steadfast despite the tears glistening in her eyes. "And I'm not going to apologize, Tom, because he makes me feel alive. With him, I'm not just a machine that drags home and work. He listens to me. He sees me. Does he see you?" Thomas laughed, but the laughter was bitter, almost insane. "So I don't see. This is not about a roof over your head," she shouted, her voice breaking. "It's about warmth, Tom, about understanding. Have you ever asked how I'm coping? How hard is it for me? No, you just come home and expect me to smile like before, and that's why you ran to someone else." He stepped towards her, his face distorted with anger. "Is that why you're destroying our family? And the children, Olivia? Have you thought about them? About Alex? About Noah? Don't you dare." She pointed a finger at his chest, her eyes sparkling. "Don't you dare say that I don't think about children. I live for them. But I can't live for you anymore, Tom. I can't be what you want when you don't even try to be there, near." He grabbed her by the shoulders, but immediately let go, stepping back. I've been around for 17 years. I built this house. I raised our children. I loved you, Olivia. And you just took it and betrayed everything. Olivia shook her head, her tears finally breaking through. I didn't mean to, she whispered. I didn't want it to happen like this. But I can't pretend anymore. I'm unhappy, Tom. And you too. Unhappy? He looked at her, feeling how rage was replaced by emptiness. And this is your decision? Abandon us? Abandon children? I don't abandon my children, she said, wiping away tears. I I just don't know what to do with you. Thomas looked at her, his chest heaving with heavy breathing. He wanted to scream, he wanted to break something, but instead his voice became cold as ice. Get out, he said. Get out of this house. Right now. Olivia froze, her eyes widening. What? She asked, her voice trembling. Are you? Are you serious? Seriously, he snapped, pointing to the door. You chose him. So go to him. Tom, wait. She began, but he interrupted. Leave, he shouted, his voice echoing through the house like thunder. I don't want to see you. Olivia looked at him, her face wet with tears. She opened her mouth to say something, but then simply nodded, grabbed her bag and jacket, and headed for the door. The door slammed behind her, and the silence that followed was deafening. Thomas collapsed onto the sofa, his hands shaking. He heard Olivia's car start and drive away, but he couldn't move. Somewhere above, a floorboard creaked, and he realized that the children had most likely woken up. He waited for Alexa to come down and start screaming, or for Noah to quietly look into the living room, but no one came. The house was empty, despite their presence, and Thomas felt that he was alone, truly alone. He covered his face with his hands, trying to hold back the tears, but they broke out anyway. He didn't know how to tell the children that their mother was gone. I didn't know how to live further. But he knew one thing for sure. The illusion of their family was shattered. The morning in the Hill House was cold and gray, as if the weather outside reflected the mood inside. The kitchen, usually filled with the clanking of dishes or Alexa's grunts, was eerily quiet today. There was a box of cereal on the table, but no one touched it. Thomas Hill sat at the table, his hands wrapped around a mug of cold coffee. He hadn't slept all night, his eyes were red and his face was drawn. After Olivia left, slamming the door, he remained in the living room, trying to understand that their marriage, their family, everything that he considered unshakable, had collapsed overnight. He didn't know how to tell the children, but he knew he couldn't lie. Not now. Footsteps were heard from above, heavy and fast. Alexa came down the stairs, her black hair with purple streaks disheveled and her face flushed with anger. She burst into the kitchen, her eyes sparkling when she saw Thomas. Where is Mom? She blurted out, her voice harsh, almost screaming. I heard you screaming at night. She's not in the bedroom. Her car isn't there. Where is she, Dad? Thomas looked up, his throat tightening. He wanted to say something soothing, but the words wouldn't come. Lex, sit down, he said quietly, pointing to a chair. We need to talk. I don't want to sit down. She crossed her arms, her nails digging into her palms. I want to know where Mom is. You kicked her out, right? It's your fault. Alexa, please, he began, but she interrupted. Don't lie to me, she shouted, her voice trembling. I heard you yell, go away. You kicked her out of the house, Dad. How could you? This is our home, her home. Thomas squeezed his mug until his knuckles turned white. He felt her words hit a nerve, but he couldn't blame her. She was right, he told Olivia to leave. But how can you explain to a 15-year-old girl that her mother admitted to cheating, that she chose someone else? Lex, this is complicated, he said, trying to speak calmly. Mom and we have problems. She made a choice, and I couldn't just leave it like that. Problems? Alexa stepped closer, her eyes filled with tears. It's not a problem, it's you. You're always at work, you never listen to her. She was unhappy, and you didn't even notice. And now you kicked her out, and what should Noah and I do? I noticed, Thomas said, his voice becoming firmer, although everything inside hurt. I tried, Lex. I tried to talk to her, to be close to her. But he fell silent, not wanting to tell the children the truth. Not now. She left because she wanted to. Lie, Alexa shouted, her tears finally breaking through. She wouldn't have left if you hadn't forced her. You ruined everything. I hate you. Alexa, please, Thomas snapped, standing up. His voice was louder than he intended, and he immediately regretted it. But she had already turned around and ran out of the kitchen, her steps echoing on the stairs. Thomas collapsed back into his chair, covering his face with his hands. He felt helpless, as if everything he touched was crumbling. He wanted to run after her, to explain, but what could he say? That their mother is in love with someone else? That their family is no longer family? A quiet sob made him raise his head. Noah stood in the doorway, his blonde hair disheveled and his eyes red from crying. He was clutching his favorite Lego, but he looked like he had forgotten why he was holding it. "Dad," he whispered, his voice shaking. "Will Mom come back? Or is she gone forever?" Thomas felt his heart clench. He stood up and walked over to his son, kneeling down to be level with him. "Noah," he said softly, placing a hand on his shoulder. "Mom is not gone forever. She'll just live on her own for a while. But she loves you. You and Alexa are her everything." "Then why isn't she here?" Noah sniffled, his tears rolling down his cheeks. She doesn't want to be with us." "No, son, it's not like that," Thomas said, although his voice was shaking. He hated himself for not being able to give Noah confidence. "This is between me and Mom. You and Alexa are not to blame for anything. Understand?" Noah nodded, but his gaze was full of fear. "What if she doesn't come back?" he whispered. "What if she finds another family?" Thomas squeezed his shoulder, feeling his own tears welling up in his eyes. "That won't happen," he said, although he himself wasn't sure. "I promise, Noah. We'll figure it out. We'll always figure it out." But Noah just lowered his head, his fingers squeezing the construction set so that the plastic creaked. "Can I go to my place?" he asked quietly. "Of course," Thomas said, straightening up. "Go. If you want to talk, I'm here." Noah left silently. His steps were almost inaudible. Thomas remained standing in the middle of the kitchen, feeling the silence pressing on him. He knew that the children blamed him, Alex openly, Noah silently, and he couldn't blame them. He had kicked Olivia out, and now they were paying for his anger. His phone vibrated on the table. Message from Olivia: "I'm at a friend's place. I'll talk to the kids later. We need time." Thomas stared at the screen, his fingers clenching. Time. She destroyed their family, and now she's asking for time. He wanted to write something sharp, but instead he simply turned off the phone. He couldn't talk to her now. Not after everything. He walked into the living room and sat down on the sofa where he had spent the previous night. His gaze fell on a family photo on the shelf. They are on the beach. Everyone is laughing. It was only 2 years ago, but it seemed like a lifetime. He knew he had to do something to protect the children, to keep something from their past. And at that moment, he made a decision. "I'll file for divorce," he said out loud, his voice quiet but firm. He didn't know how it would be, how he would explain to the children, how he would cope himself. But he knew he couldn't let Olivia continue to ruin their lives. Not after what she did. Kevin Johnson's office was in downtown Seattle, in an old brick building with large windows overlooking a bustling street. The inside smelled of leather from the chairs, coffee from an expensive car, and a little dust from the stacks of legal files on the shelves. Kevin, Thomas's best friend and lawyer, sat at the massive wooden desk, his dark suit immaculate and his thin-rimmed glasses glinting in the light of the desk lamp. At 42, he looked younger, but his straightforward gaze and calm confidence betrayed a former district attorney accustomed to dealing with chaos. Thomas Hill sat opposite, his police uniform slightly wrinkled and shadows under his eyes from sleepless nights. In his hands, he held a folder with documents that he took out of the safe in the morning, a marriage contract signed 17 years ago. His father insisted on this before the wedding, and at the time Thomas considered it an unnecessary formality. Now this folder was his anchor in the storm that became his life. He placed it on the table and Kevin immediately took it, turning to the first page. So, Kevin began, his voice smooth, professional. Are you sure you want to move forward? Divorce is no joke, Tom, especially with children. Thomas clenched his jaw, his fingers tapping the armrest of his chair. I'm sure, Kev. She, she admitted that she was having an affair with some paramedics from her hospital. I saw how she went to see him. I can't forgive this. Kevin nodded, not taking his eyes off the contract. Fine, let's sort it out in order. He flipped through a couple of pages, his eyebrows raised slightly. The contract was drawn up correctly. The house is in your name, no common large assets. This greatly simplifies things. If Olivia doesn't contest, the division of property will go smoothly. Can she challenge? Thomas asked, his voice hoarse. I thought it was reinforced concrete. In theory, yes, Kevin said, leaning back in his chair. But she can try to claim that she contributed to the house repairs, utilities, whatever. The courts sometimes cooperate, especially if there are children. But with this contract, your position is strong. The house will remain yours. Thomas nodded, but his thoughts were not about home. He thought about the children, about Alex, who screamed that she hated him, about Noah, who was afraid that his mother was gone forever. What about custody? He asked, leaning closer. I don't want them to live with her. Not with this. James. Kevin took off his glasses, wiped them with a napkin, and looked at Thomas. Custody is more complicated, he said, his tone becoming more serious. Courts in Washington generally favor joint custody if both parents are competent. Olivia is a mother, she works, she has no criminal record. She will fight for the children, Tom, and she has a chance. Chances. Thomas raised his voice, his hands clenched into fists. She cheated on me, Kev. She left home and abandoned her children. Which court will give her custody after this? Calm down, Kevin said, raising his hand. I'm on your side, but let's be realistic. Cheating is bad, but courts rarely make it a deciding factor. If Olivia proves that she is a caring mother and has a stable life, the court may give her at least partial custody. And if she lives with this James, the court will look at how he influences the children. Does it influence? Thomas snorted, his face distorted. This guy destroyed my family. I don't want him around Alexa and Noah. No way. I understand, Kevin said, his voice remaining calm, and we will use it. If James is a new factor in her life, we can raise the issue of stability. But you need to be prepared, Tom. Olivia may accuse you of being emotionally abusive and driving her out. The courts don't like it when one parent kicks out the other. She left on her own, Thomas said, his voice trembling. I was furious, yes. But she admitted that she was sleeping with him. What was I supposed to do? Smile and pretend everything is fine? Nobody says you had to pretend, Kevin said, leaning closer. But in court, facts are important, not emotions. We can prove treason your testimony, maybe parking records, if there are any. This will weaken her position. But the main thing is the children. The court will take into account their opinion, especially Alexa, she is 15. If she says she wants to live with you, it will be significant. Thomas nodded, but his heart sank. He remembered Alexa screaming, I hate you. Will she agree to live with him? And Noah? He was so afraid of losing his mother. What if they want to be with her? He asked quietly, his gaze falling on the table. Kevin paused, then said, then it will be more difficult. But we will fight, Tom. You are their father, you have a stable job, a house, no stains on your biography. We will show that you can provide them with a better environment. And Olivia, her new romance could work against her if we present it correctly. We'll serve it right, Thomas repeated, his voice bitter. It sounds like a game, Kev. And these are my children. I know, Kevin said, his tone softening, and I will do everything so that you don't lose them. But you need to control yourself. No outbursts, no threats towards Olivia. The court will see this as aggression, and it will hurt you. Thomas ran his hand over his face, feeling the fatigue rolling in like a wave. I'm trying, he said. But this is hell, Kev. Alexa blames me, Noah can barely speak. And Olivia. She hasn't even called the kids since yesterday. She is with a friend, she wrote to me, but did not contact them. How should I explain this? Honestly, Kevin said, his gaze firm. But carefully, don't tell them about cheating until you have to. They are already in shock. Just say that you and your mom are working things out, but you both love them. And Tom, find a psychologist. For them. And maybe for myself. A psychologist? Thomas chuckled, but there was no mockery in his voice. Maybe you're right. I can't cope, Kev. They look at me like I've ruined everything. Your job is to protect the children. We'll start with the divorce filing next week. I will prepare the documents you just sign and collect everything that can confirm her betrayal messages, calls, whatever. This will help with custody. Thomas nodded, his gaze falling on the marriage contract lying on the table. I want full custody, he said quietly but firmly. I won't let this James raise my children. They will stay with me. Then we'll fight for it, Kevin said, closing the folder. But Tom, be prepared for the fact that it won't be quick. And not easy. Olivia won't go down without a fight, especially when it comes to her children. Let him try, Thomas said, his voice cold. She's done enough already. Kevin looked at him, his gaze was full of sympathy, but he didn't say anything. Instead, he stood up, walked around the table, and tapped Thomas on the shoulder. Go home, he said. Talk to the children. And try to get some sleep, okay? You look like a ghost. Thanks, Kev, Thomas said, standing up. I appreciate it. Is it true? You're welcome, Kevin replied, smiling. We'll get through this, Tom. Together. Thomas nodded, but he didn't feel any better as he left the office. Morning light barely filtered through the dirty windows of the Seattle police station. The briefing room smelled of stale coffee and paper, and the hum of officers' voices mixed with the crackle of walkie-talkies. Thomas Hill sat in the far corner, his notebook open but the page blank. His uniform was ironed, but his face looked haggard, dark circles under his eyes, pursed lips. He tried to focus on the words of Sergeant Martinez, who was handing out tasks for the day, but his thoughts wandered. Olivia, children, divorce, everything mixed into a heavy lump that he could not swallow. Hill, you're taking the lake area, Martinez said, her voice breaking him out of his trance. She stood at the board, pointing at the map. Yesterday, they again complained about suspicious characters. Check what's what. Got it, Thomas muttered, without even looking at the map. His fingers clenched the pen, but he didn't write down a word. Danny Corso, his partner, who was sitting next to him, leaned closer. Hey, Tom, are you okay? He asked quietly, his brows furrowed. You've been like a zombie for 2 days now. Did something happen? Nothing, Thomas snapped, his voice harsher than he intended. I just didn't get enough sleep. Everything is fine. Okay, yeah, Danny chuckled, but his gaze remained serious. Listen, I don't meddle in your business, but if there's something wrong with your family, tell me. I see you're not in business. I'm in, Thomas said, looking at his notebook to avoid Danny's eyes. Let's just work, okay? Danny shrugged, but didn't leave. Okay, but if you keep your head in the clouds like that, I don't want us to get shot because of your absent-mindedness. Seriously, Tom, you almost missed a turn on patrol today. I said everything is fine. Thomas snapped, his voice echoing throughout the room and several heads turning in their direction. He immediately fell silent, feeling his cheeks burn. Sorry, he muttered, looking down. It's just a lousy day. Martinez looked at him from across the room, her gaze sharp. Hill, if you need time off, tell me now, she said, crossing her arms. I don't need officers who aren't 100% here. I don't need a day off, Thomas said, trying to speak calmly. I can handle it. I hope so, she replied, but her tone was full of doubt. Then let's get to work, and keep your head in business. Thomas nodded, but when the briefing ended, he remained seated, feeling tired and angry fighting inside. He knew he was making mistakes yesterday. He almost missed a call on the radio, and this morning he filled out a report incorrectly. His colleagues noticed, and this only increased his irritation. He didn't want to be weak, he didn't want to be pitied. But the truth was that he was drowning, and no one could throw him a life preserver. The Hill House greeted Thomas with silence, broken only by the muffled beat of music from Alexa's room. He took off his shoes in the hallway, threw the keys on the table, and walked into the kitchen. On the table sat an empty cereal box and a lone dirty bowl, all that remained from the children's dinner. He sighed as he opened the refrigerator. It was almost empty, half a bottle of milk, a couple of yogurts, an apple lying around. He knew that he should go to the store and cook something normal, but he didn't have the strength. "Lex, Noah," he shouted, hoping that at least someone would come down. "Did you eat? Want to order pizza?" There was no answer. Only the music from Alexa's room became louder, as if she had turned up the volume on purpose. Thomas clenched his jaw and walked up the stairs. He knocked on his daughter's door, but did not receive an answer. "Alexa, open it," he said, trying to speak calmly. "We need to talk." The door opened slightly, and Alexa appeared in the opening. Her eyes were cold. "About what?" she asked, crossing her arms. "About how you kicked your mom out? Or how will you force us to live without her now?" "Lex, I don't," Thomas began, but she interrupted. "Don't lie, Dad," she said, her voice sharp. "I'm not stupid. She left because of you, and now Noah thinks she left us. Cool, right?" "It's not that simple," he said, feeling her words hit his nerves. "Mom and I, we have problems, but I didn't want you and Noah to suffer." "Well, congratulations, you screwed up," she said, her eyes sparkling. "I don't want to talk to you. Leave me alone." She slammed the door, and the music sounded even louder. Thomas stood in front of the closed door, his fists clenched. He wanted to barge in, force her to listen, but knew that would only make things worse. Instead, he walked to Noah's room and knocked softly. "Noah, can I come in?" he asked, opening the door slightly. Noah was sitting on the bed, with headphones on and his head glued to his tablet. His room was littered with Legos, but he wasn't building anything, he was just watching a video, his face pale. When he saw Thomas, he took off one earphone. "What?" he asked quietly, his voice almost lifeless. "Have you eaten?" Thomas asked, sitting on the edge of the bed. "I can order something. Pizza, maybe." "I don't want to," Noah said, looking down. "I'm not hungry." Thomas looked at his son, feeling his heart clench. Noah had always been quiet, but now he seemed even more withdrawn, as if he was hiding inside himself. "Noah," Thomas said softly, "I know this is hard for you. But we can handle it. We always manage, right?" Noah shrugged without looking up. "Will Mom come back?" he asked so quietly that Thomas could barely hear. I don't know, son," he said, hating himself for telling the truth. "But she loves you. And here I am. You and I and Alexa are a team, right?" Noah nodded, but his gaze remained blank. He put the earphone back on and turned his attention to the tablet. Thomas stood up, realizing that the conversation was over. He left the room, feeling even more helpless than before. Night had fallen over the house, and Thomas sat in the living room, alone, with a bottle of beer in his hand. The TV was turned off, and the only sound was the distant hum of music from Alexa's room. He tried to remember the last time he and the children talked normally, laughed, and were a family. But all that came to mind were quarrels, tears, slamming doors. His phone was on the coffee table, and he knew he had to call Kevin to discuss the divorce. Or maybe find a psychologist, as Kevin suggested. He even opened the search engine on his phone and entered Family Psychologist Seattle, but closed the tab without selecting anyone. He felt that asking for help would mean admitting defeat. He was a policeman. He was used to coping on his own. But now he couldn't cope, and it scared him. He stood up and walked into the kitchen to throw away the empty bottle. On the refrigerator was a drawing of Noah, a Lego castle he had drawn last year. Next to it was a photo of Alexa, where she was holding a certificate for a school art competition. Thomas looked at these pieces of their lives, feeling tears welling up in his eyes. He didn't want to lose them. I didn't want them to grow up in a broken family. But he didn't know how to stop it. "I have to do something," he muttered, his voice hoarse. For them. He's back. He went into the living room, took the phone and texted Kevin. Find a psychologist for children. I'm ready. He sent the message and leaned back on the couch, closing his eyes. It was a small step, but he felt it was all he could do now. Tomorrow he will talk to the children and try again. But today he was too tired, too broken, to fight any further. The Bean and Brew Cafe in downtown Seattle was a cozy but noisy place where the smell of freshly brewed coffee mingled with the aroma of baked goods. The wooden tables were filled with students' laptops and office workers' mugs, while indie music played softly from the speakers. Thomas Hill sat by the window, his fingers nervously tapping the rim of his ceramic cup of black coffee. He arrived earlier than agreed to gather his thoughts. Olivia wrote to him yesterday, briefly and dryly. We need to talk about children. Pike Street Cafe, tomorrow at 2 p.m. He agreed, although every muscle in his body protested. After her confession of cheating, after he kicked her out of the house, he wasn't sure he was ready to see her. But he came for Alexa and Noah. Thomas looked exhausted. His dark hair was slightly disheveled. There were shadows under his eyes, and his police uniform, which he had not had time to change from the morning patrol, was slightly wrinkled. He tried to focus on the sounds of the cafe, the clinking of spoons, snatches of conversation, but his thoughts returned to the children. Alexa barely spoke to him, and Noah withdrew into himself, burying his face in his tablet. He knew he had to find a way to make their lives better, but without Olivia, it seemed impossible. Still, the thought of her taking the children to her new lover, James, made his fists clench. The cafe door dinged and Olivia entered. She looked tired, but still beautiful. Her reddish hair was pulled back into a low ponytail, and light makeup hid the signs of insomnia. She was wearing jeans and a dark green sweater that Thomas remembered from their weekend together in Lake Tahoe. She noticed him and walked towards the table, her steps cautious, as if she were walking through a minefield. Hello, she said, sitting down opposite him. Her voice was quiet but firm. Thank you for coming. You said it was about children, Thomas replied, his tone cold. He pushed the cup away, crossing his arms. I'm here for them. Speak. Olivia nodded, her fingers fiddling with the strap of her bag. I want us to agree, she began, looking into his eyes. For Alexa and Noah's sake, they shouldn't suffer because of us. I know that. That everything went wrong, but we can do this without a scandal. Without a scandal. Thomas narrowed his eyes. His voice became harsher. Are you serious, Olivia? You destroyed our family, and now you want everything to be peaceful. I didn't destroy it, she said, her voice trembling, but she quickly pulled herself together. We're both to blame, Tom. We stopped being a family a long time ago. I was honest with you. Honest? He leaned closer, his eyes sparkling. Do you call betrayal honesty? You left with that James while I was waiting for you in the parking lot. You admitted that you sleep with him. This is not honesty, this is betrayal. Olivia pursed her lips, her cheeks slightly flushed. I don't want to discuss this again, she said, trying to speak calmly. I made a mistake, yes, but I don't want the kids to pay for it. I'm their mother, Tom. I want to be a part of their life. Part of their life? Thomas snorted, his voice getting louder, and the couple at the next table looked around. You left them, Olivia. You went to your lover and didn't even call them. Alexa is yelling at me. Noah is afraid that you're gone forever, and you're sitting here talking about compromise. I didn't leave them, she shouted, her voice breaking, and she immediately lowered her tone, noticing the glances around her. I live with a friend, Tom. I'm not with James. I'm trying to figure out how to fix everything. But you do everything to make me feel like a monster. Aren't you a monster? He said, his voice full of bitterness. You chose him, Olivia. You chose him over us, and now you want me to pretend that everything is fine, so that I would let you take the children to him. I'm not going to take them to him, she said, her eyes filling with tears. I want joint custody, so that they can be with both of us. They need me, Tom, and in you. We can agree to make it work. Did it work? He shook his head, his face distorted. You think I'll let this James guy be around my kids? After he destroyed our family? Do you even understand what you've done? Stop mentioning James. She blurted out, her voice shaking with anger. This is not about him. This is about us, about the children. I'm trying to find a way out, and you. You just want to punish me. Punish? Thomas stood up, his fists clenched, and the cup on the table clinked. Do you think this is about punishment? You broke my heart, Olivia. You broke our family. And now you sit here and ask for a compromise as if it were a business deal. Olivia looked at him, her tears finally breaking through. I didn't want it to happen like this, she whispered, wiping her cheeks. I didn't want to hurt you. But I can't change the past. I just want the kids to be happy. Are you happy? He leaned towards her, his voice became quieter, but there was steel in it. They won't be happy as long as you're with him. You made a choice, Olivia, and it's not us. She shook her head, her hands shaking. You're not giving me a chance, she said, her voice filled with pain. I came to negotiate, and you just hate me. I don't hate you, he said, but his voice wavered. I loved you, but you killed it, and I don't know how to trust you with the children now. Olivia stood up, her bag sliding to the floor, but she didn't reach down to pick it up. I won't give up, Tom, she said, her voice quiet but firm. I will fight for Alexa and Noah, and I hope that we could do this together. But you don't want to. She turned and walked towards the door, her steps quick, as if she was afraid she would change her mind. Thomas looked after her, feeling anger and pain fighting inside. He wanted to shout, to stop her, but the words got stuck in his throat. The door dinged and Olivia disappeared, leaving behind only the smell of her perfume and an emptiness that was worse than any quarrel. Thomas collapsed back into his chair, his hands shaking. The waitress came over asking if he wanted more coffee, but he just shook his head. The cafe continued to buzz around him, but he felt cut off from the world. He knew he should have tried to negotiate, for the sake of the children, but every time he thought about James, about her betrayal, anger overwhelmed him. He was not ready to compromise. Not now. The kitchen smelled like the toast Thomas had tried to make, but it had burned, and now he was scraping the black edges over the sink. Alexa sat at the table, staring at her phone, her headphones dangling around her neck. Noah hunched over a bowl of cereal, silently picking at his spoon without looking up. The silence in the house was almost palpable, and Thomas felt it pressing on him, increasing his fatigue. There was a knock on the door, and Thomas frowned. He was not expecting guests. After wiping his hands with a towel, he walked into the hallway and opened the door. A courier in a blue uniform stood on the threshold, holding an envelope. Thomas Hill? The courier asked, looking at the tablet. Yes, Thomas answered, his voice wary. Sign here, said the courier, holding out the stylus. Thomas signed, took the envelope, and closed the door. The envelope was stamped from the Seattle District Court. His heart sank. He returned to the kitchen, opening the envelope. There was a summons inside. He skimmed the text, and every word hit like a hammer. Olivia filed a lawsuit for joint custody of Alexa and Noah, accusing him of emotional abuse and coldness in marital relations. She claimed his actions, including throwing her out of the house, created an unstable environment for the children. What is this? Alexa asked, noticing how her father's face turned white. She took off her headphones, her gaze wary. Nothing, Lex, Thomas said, folding the papers. Just documents. Go get ready. It's time for you to go to school. Don't lie, she said, her voice becoming harsher. This is about Mom, right? What did she do? Thomas clenched his jaw, trying to control himself. This is an adult matter, he said. I'll sort it out. Just trust me, okay? Alexa snorted, but didn't argue. She grabbed her backpack and walked out, saying, as if I have a choice. Noah, let's go. Noah stood up silently, his eyes darting to his father, but he said nothing. When the children left, Thomas collapsed in a chair, rereading the summons. Emotional abuse. The words burned. He knew he was harsh, that he kicked her out in anger, but violence, it was too much. He grabbed the phone and dialed Kevin Johnson, his lawyer. After 2 rings, Kevin answered. "Tom, what happened?" Kevin asked, his voice cheerful but wary. "You sound like you've been run over by a truck." "Subpoena," Thomas said, his voice shaking with anger. "Olivia filed for joint custody. Accuses me of emotional abuse." "Kev, this is nonsense." "Calm down," Kevin said, his tone becoming businesslike. "Come to the office. Bring the summons. We'll figure it out." "She wants kids," Thomas said, his voice breaking. "She's lying about me to get them." "I won't allow it, Kev." "You won't have to," Kevin replied, "but we need to act quickly. Collect everything that confirms your stability income certificates, work schedule, letters from school, whatever. And if there is anything about her cheating messages, photos, witnesses, take everything. This will be our trump card." "Okay," Thomas said, clutching the phone. "I'll be there in an hour." "And Tom," Kevin added, "control yourself. The court will see if you fail. We will prove that you are the best parent. Agreed?" "Agreed," Thomas muttered and hung up. He looked at the summons, feeling his anger turn to determination. Olivia could lie all she wanted, but he wouldn't give her the children. Kevin's office was the same as always. Neat stacks of files, the smell of coffee, soft light from the window. Kevin sat at the table, leafing through the agenda, his glasses sparkling. Thomas sat across from him, his hands nervously fiddling with a folder of documents, certificates, transcripts, even a letter from Noah's school coach confirming that Thomas was always present at the games. "She's playing dirty," Kevin said, putting the summons aside. "Emotional abuse is a serious charge, but without evidence it is weak. Does she have any witnesses, letters, anything specific?" "I don't know," Thomas said, his voice hoarse. "She wrote that I kicked her out, that I was cold. But she was the one who cheated Kev. She left with that James, I saw it." "This will help us," Kevin said, making a note. "If we prove her affair, it will show her instability. The courts don't like it when one parent disrupts the family for a new partner. But we need facts. Do you have something? Messages? Video from the parking lot?" "Only my word," Thomas said, his shoulders slumping. "I saw them, but didn't take them off. I was too shocked." "Okay," Kevin said, tapping his pen on the table. "We can request recordings from the hospital cameras if they have been preserved, and your testimony under oath also has weight. But the main thing is your life. You must show that you are a stable parent. Work, home, participation in the lives of children. All this needs to be documented." "I'm trying," Thomas said, his voice becoming quieter. "But the children, they blame me. Alexa barely speaks. Noah is always wearing headphones. I don't know how to get them out of this." "It's okay," Kevin said, his tone softening. "They are stressed. The court will call them to talk with a family psychologist. Their opinion will carry weight, especially Alexa's. She's 15. If she says she wants to be with you, that almost seals the deal." "What if not?" Thomas asked, his gaze falling on the table. "If they choose her?" "Then we will fight," Kevin said, his voice firm. "But I believe that you can convince them. Be with them, Tom. Speak. They need to know that you are fighting for them." Thomas nodded, but his chest felt heavy. He knew he should be strong, but he felt like he was drowning. "When is the trial?" he asked. "The preliminary hearing is in 2 weeks," Kevin said. "We have time to prepare. But Tom, control yourself. No breakdowns, especially in front of children. The court will see this." "I understand," Thomas said, standing up. "Thank you, Kev." "You're welcome," Kevin replied, smiling. "We can handle it. Go home, talk to the children. They are your main strength." The county courtroom was cold and sterile, with rows of wooden benches and the smell of polished wood. Thomas sat next to Kevin, his suit the only one he wore to weddings and funerals seeming too tight. Opposite, across the aisle, sat Olivia. Her lawyer, a middle-aged woman with a sharp gaze, whispered something in her ear. Olivia looked collected, but her hands, clutching her bag, betrayed nervousness. The judge, an elderly woman with a tired face, announced that the children would talk to a family psychologist in a separate room. Thomas felt his heart clench. He knew that their words could decide everything, and he was afraid that they would choose Olivia out of fear, out of love, out of guilt. "They can handle it," Kevin whispered, noticing his tension. "Did you speak well to them?" "I tried," Thomas replied, his voice hoarse. "But they're so far away, Kev. I don't know what they will say." "Then trust them," Kevin said, clapping him on the shoulder. "They know who is nearby." Thomas nodded, but his eyes were focused on the door through which Alexa and Noah had disappeared. He felt helpless, as if his life depended on the words of two children who were barely holding on themselves. The family psychologist's office at the court was small but warm. Soft chairs, pastel walls, a table with pencils and drawing paper. Dr. Emily Reed, a woman in her 40s with kind eyes and a calm smile, sat opposite Alexa. The girl fidgeted in the chair. Her black hair with purple streaks was gathered in a messy ponytail, and her eyes darted around the room. "Alexa," Emily began, her voice soft, "I know it's hard for you right now, but I'm here to listen. Tell me how you feel. About Mom, about Dad, about everything that happens." Alexa pursed her lips, her fingers fiddling with the hem of her t-shirt. "I'm angry," she finally said, her voice quiet but firm. "Both of them. They destroyed everything. Mom, she's gone. She chose some guy instead of us. And Dad, he kicked her out. They think only about themselves." Emily nodded, making a note on her notepad. "It's hard when parents quarrel. Do you feel like they don't think about you and Noah?" "Yes," Alexa said, her eyes sparkling. "Mom says she loves us, but where is she? He lives with a friend and doesn't call. And Dad, he tries, but he is always angry. I don't know who to believe." "I understand," Emily said, her tone remaining calm. "If you had to choose who you want to live with, what would you say?" Alexa fell silent, her gaze falling to the floor. "With Dad," she finally said, her voice almost a whisper. "He didn't abandon us. Mom, she chose another person instead of our family. I don't want to live with her if she's with him." Emily nodded, her face remaining neutral. "Thank you for sharing, Alexa. This is important. Do you want to add anything?" "No," Alexa muttered, crossing her arms. "I just want it to be over." Noah sat in the same chair, his blonde hair falling in his eyes and his hands clutching the small Lego set he had brought with him. He looked smaller than he was, as if he was trying to hide within himself. Emily smiled at him, trying to create a trusting atmosphere. "Noah," she said softly, "you can say whatever you think. It's just you and me here. Tell me how you feel." Noah shrugged, his gaze glued to the construction kit. "Bad," he muttered. "Mom left. Dad is evil. I don't know what will happen." "It's scary when everything changes," Emily said. "Do you miss your mom?" "Yes," Noah said, his voice shaking. She always read to me before bed. But now she's gone. I'm afraid she won't come back." "I understand," Emily said, her voice full of sympathy. "And Dad, what about him?" He's trying," Noah said, his fingers squeezing the construction set. "But he works a lot, and he's sad. I don't want him to leave either." "No one will leave Noah," Emily said. "Both of your parents love you. If you could choose who to live with, what would you say?" Noah fell silent, his eyes filled with tears. "I don't want to choose," he whispered. "But I don't want to move. I want to stay at home. With Dad. These are my things, my friends. I'm afraid of a new life." Emily nodded, making another note. "Thank you, Noah. You are very brave in what he said. Would you like to draw something while we wait?" Noah shook his head, clutching the construction set. "Can I just sit?" "Of course," Emily said, smiling. But her gaze was serious. She saw that the children were stressed. Their words were full of pain and fear. But their preference was clear. They wanted to stay with Thomas in a familiar house, in a familiar life. The school principal's office was cramped, with a wooden table littered with folders and an old chair that creaked with every movement. On the wall hung certificates and a poster that read, "Success starts with respect." The principal, Mrs. Ellen Parker, a woman in her 50s with short gray hair, sat at the desk, her gaze stern but not unsympathetic. Sitting opposite her, arms crossed and staring at the floor, was Alexa Hill. Her black hair with purple streaks was disheveled, and her face was flushed with anger. She had just lost her temper in literature class by rudely responding to the teacher who asked her to turn off her phone. Now she was waiting for her father, and this only increased her irritation. "Alexa," Mrs. Parker began, her voice calm but firm. "I know you are a talented girl. Your drawings at the school exhibition were amazing. But what you said to Miss Davis today is unacceptable. Do you understand why you were called?" Alexa shrugged, her lips pursing. "She got into my business," she muttered. "I just wanted to be left alone." "Teachers don't meddle in your business," Mrs. Parker said, adjusting her glasses. "They are trying to help. But shouting and being rude is not the answer. Can you tell me what's going on? Maybe something is wrong at home?" "Nothing is happening," Alexa snapped, her voice becoming sharper. "It's just that everyone wants something from me, but I'm tired." Mrs. Parker sighed, but before she could answer, there was a knock on the door. Thomas Hill walked in, his face tense and his uniform slightly wrinkled from his morning patrol. He glanced at Alexa, then at the director. "Mr. Hill, thank you for coming," Mrs. Parker said, pointing to the chair. "Take a seat. We need to discuss Alexa's behavior." Thomas sat down, his hands on his knees. "What's happened?" he asked, trying to speak calmly, although everything was boiling inside. He had already received a call from school, and it was another blow to an already difficult day. Today, in literature class, Alexa answered the teacher rudely. Mrs. Parker began. She refused to turn off the phone, and when Miss Davis made a remark, she called her. Let's say, inappropriately. "This is not the first time, Mr. Hill. In recent weeks, Alexa has become withdrawn and hot-tempered. We are worried." Thomas looked at his daughter, but she turned away, her gaze glued to the window. "Lex," he said quietly, "why are you doing this? You know this is wrong." "What should I do?" she blurted out, finally turning to him. Her eyes sparkled. "Everyone is coming at me. Teachers, you, everyone, and I just want to be left alone." "Alexa," Mrs. Parker intervened, "no one wants to hurt you. But this behavior has consequences. I can order a suspension for a couple of days, but I want to understand how to help. Maybe you should talk to your school psychologist." "I'm not crazy," Alexa shouted, her voice trembling. "I don't need a psychologist. I need my family, but it doesn't exist anymore because you and your mom ruined everything." Thomas froze, her words hitting him like a slap in the face. He opened his mouth to answer, but Mrs. Parker raised her hand. "Okay, let's all calm down," she said. "Mr. Hill, I suggest you talk to Alexa alone. She's clearly going through something serious. We can help, but you need to be on the same side." "I understand," Thomas said, his voice hoarse. "Thank you, Mrs. Parker. I'll figure it out." The director nodded. "Alexa, you can go, but I want to see you tomorrow with an apology for Miss Davis." "Understood." Alexa nodded without looking at her and left the office, slamming the door. Thomas apologized and followed her. Thomas caught up with Alexa in an empty school hallway that smelled of detergent and chalk. She stood at the lockers with her arms crossed, her eyes filled with tears that she was trying to hold back. "Lex," Thomas said, stopping a couple of steps away, "talk to me. What's happening? You've never behaved like this. Don't you notice?" she shouted, her voice echoing down the corridor. "Everything is falling apart, Dad. Mom is gone, living her life, happy with this James. I saw her photo on social networks. She's smiling as if we weren't there. And you hardly smile either. You just walk around like a robot and expect me to be normal." Thomas felt his heart clench. He stepped closer, but she retreated. "Lex, I know you're hurting," he said, his voice soft. "It hurts me too. But I'm here. I didn't leave, and I will never leave." "Then why is everything so bad?" Her voice broke and tears streamed down her cheeks. "Why can't you bring her back? Why can't we be a family?" Thomas clenched his fists, fighting his own pain. He wanted to say that Olivia had betrayed them, that she had chosen someone else, but instead he said, I can't bring her back, Lex. But I can be with you and Noah. We can handle it. Together. Alexa shook her head, her tears dripping onto the floor. I don't want to cope, she whispered. I want everything to be as before. Thomas stepped towards her and, without thinking, hugged her. She tensed at first, but then went limp, burying her face in his shoulder. Her sobs were quiet, but they tore his heart. I know, baby, he whispered, stroking her head. I know, but we are stronger than we think. You, me, Noah, we are a team, and I promise we will find a way. Alexa nodded, not looking away from him. I'm so tired, Dad, she muttered. I don't want to be angry all the time. Then let's try something different, he said, pulling back to look into her eyes. I was thinking, maybe we should talk to someone. With a psychologist, all three, to figure it out. What do you say? Alexa sniffled, her gaze wary. Are you serious? Will you go yourself? Yes, he said, smiling, although it was difficult for him. I'll go. For your sake. For our sake. She paused, then nodded. Okay, but only if you don't pretend everything is cool. It's agreed, Thomas said, hugging her again. For the first time in weeks, he felt like there was a thin thread of connection between them. It wasn't enough, but it was a start. The office of Sarah Cooper, a family therapist, was light and airy, with soft sofas, green plants, and a box of toys for younger clients. Sarah, a woman in her 40s with a warm smile and long brown hair, sat in a chair holding a notepad. She had worked with families in crisis and knew how to create a safe space for conversations. Today, she met with the Hill family separately so that everyone could speak freely. Thomas sat on the sofa, his hands on his knees, but his fingers clenched nervously. He looked out of place, his eyes darting around the room. Mr. Hill, Sarah began, her voice soft. Tell me what brought you here. How do you feel? Thomas sighed, his shoulders slumping. I don't know where to start, he said, his voice hoarse. My wife, Olivia, she cheated on me. With a paramedic from her hospital. I kicked her out, and now we are getting a divorce. Children. They blame me. I feel like I've let them down. This is a grave betrayal, Sarah said, her tone full of sympathy. How do you deal with this? It's bad, he admitted, his gaze falling to the floor. I'm angry. On her, on myself. I have to be strong for the kids, but I don't know how. Alexa screams, Noah is silent. I'm afraid I'll lose them. Will you lose? Sarah asked. Why do you think so? Because I'm not a perfect father, he said, his voice shaking. I work late, I get frustrated. And Olivia, she's their mother. What if the court gives them to her? Or if they choose it themselves? You're afraid you won't be able to cope without them, Sarah said, making a note. But you're here, trying to help. This is already a lot. What would you like to change? I want them to be happy, Thomas said, his eyes sparkling. So that they don't be afraid, don't get angry. I want to be what I should be for them. But I don't know how. This is a good start, Sarah said, smiling. Let's work on this together. Are you ready? Thomas nodded, although there was still uncertainty in his gaze. Yes, for their sake. Alexa sat with her legs crossed, her arms crossed. She looked at Sarah defiantly, but there was pain in her eyes. Alexa, Sarah said, tell me how you feel. No one will judge. This is a safe place. I'm angry, Alexa said, her voice harsh. On my mother, because she abandoned us. At Dad for kicking her out. On myself, because I can't do anything. Everything is falling apart, and I don't know how to live. It's very hard, Sarah said. Do you feel like you've lost control? Yes, Alexa said, her voice shaking. Mom is now with James, and she is happy. What about us? She doesn't need us. And Dad, he tries, but it's like he's not with us. I want everything to be like before. He won't come back sooner, Sarah said softly, but you can find a new way to be with Daddy, with Noah. What do you need from them? Alexa paused, her eyes filling with tears. I want them to be close, she whispered, so that Noah wouldn't be afraid, so that Dad would talk to me. I want us to be a family, even without Mom. It's possible, said Sarah. You, Noah, Dad, you can lean on each other. Do you want to try it? Alexa nodded, wiping away her tears. Yes, but this is scary. Of course, said Sarah, but you are strong, and you are not alone. Noah sat clutching his Legos, his eyes glued to the floor. Sarah leaned a little closer, her smile encouraging. Noah, she said, tell me how you feel. Whatever you want. I'm afraid, he whispered, his voice barely audible. Mom left. Dad is sad. I don't want things to change. I want to go home to my things. You love your home, Sarah said. And my parents. Tell me about Mom and Dad. Mom, she's kind, Noah said, his eyes sparkling. But she's not with us now. I'm afraid that she will forget me. And Dad, he's always at home, but he seems to be far away. You feel lonely, Sarah said. But you are not alone. You have a dad, Alexa. They love you. What would you like from them? So that they don't quarrel, Noah said, his voice trembling. And so that we can be together. Me, Dad, Lex, as a team. The team is great, Sarah said, smiling. You can be part of this team. Do you want to try talking to Dad and Alexa more? Noah nodded, his fingers relaxing on the construction set. Yes, but I don't know how. We'll learn, Sarah said. Together. The Seattle District Courtroom was cold and solemn, with high ceilings and rows of wooden benches that creaked under the weight of the few spectators. Judge Margaret Clare, an elderly woman with a tired but attentive look, sat at her desk, leafing through documents. Thomas Hill sat next to Kevin Johnson, his lawyer, his hands clasped in his lap. He felt his heart pounding, every sound in the room, the rustling of papers, someone coughing from behind seemed deafening. Across the aisle, Olivia sat, her face pale and her eyes puffy. Her lawyer whispered something to her, but she barely listened. The judge looked up. It's Hill v. Hill, she announced, her voice level. We reviewed all of the evidence presented, including the parties' statements, the family psychologist's report, and interviews with the children, Alexa and Noah Hill. I'm ready to announce the decision. Thomas held his breath. Kevin put his hand on his shoulder, whispering, Breathe, Tom. We did everything we could. The court takes into account several key factors, the judge began. Firstly, the fact of adultery on the part of Mrs. Hill, confirmed by testimony and circumstantial evidence. This is not decisive, but it affects the stability of the family environment. Secondly, the opinion of the children, who clearly expressed their desire to live with their father, Mr. Hill, in an environment familiar to them. Olivia lowered her head, her hands clenching on her bag. Thomas glanced at her, but immediately looked away, feeling a mixture of relief and pain. Mr. Hill has demonstrated stability, the judge continued. He has a permanent job, a house, and is actively involved in the lives of children. Considering this, as well as their emotional state, the court awards primary custody of Alexa and Noah Hill to Mr. Thomas Hill. Thomas exhaled, his shoulders relaxing. Kevin nodded at him, a discreet smile on his face. You did it, he whispered. Mrs. Hill, the judge said, her tone becoming a little softer, you retain the right to see the children in agreement with Mr. Hill. The court recommends that you continue to work with a family psychologist to restore your relationship with your children. This is all. The hammer struck, and the hall was filled with a quiet roar. Olivia sat motionless, her eyes filled with tears. Her lawyer touched her arm, but she just shook her head. Thomas stood up, his legs feeling weak. He wanted to say something, but the words stuck. Kevin led him to the exit, whispering, Come on, Tom. The courthouse hallway was filled with people, lawyers, clerks, families waiting for their cases. Olivia walked out of the hall. Her steps were slow, as if she was carrying an invisible weight. She stopped at the window, looking out onto the street, her tears rolling down her cheeks. She felt everything was falling apart. Her children, her life, her hopes. Olivia, a voice said from behind. She turned around and saw James, his blonde hair slightly disheveled and his face full of worry. He stepped towards her, holding out his hand. I'm here. Everything will be fine. Fine. Her voice broke and she stepped back. My children, they don't want to see me, James. They chose him. I am their mother, and they turned their backs on me. This is temporary, he said, trying to speak softly. They're just angry. Give them time. They love you. Do they love you? She laughed, but it was a bitter laugh. I destroyed everything. I thought. I thought that with you I would find myself, but I lost them. How could I be so stupid? Hey, don't blame yourself, Jane said, stepping closer. You made a choice to be honest. We can handle it. Together. Olivia shook her head, her tears not stopping. No, James, I don't know if I can handle it. They are my life. And now I have nothing. She turned away, her shoulders shaking. James wanted to hug her, but stopped, feeling that she would not accept comfort. He stood silently until she left, her footsteps disappearing into the din of the corridor. The sun lazily filtered through the blinds in the living room of the Hill house, streaking the floor with golden stripes. Thomas sat at the kitchen table, flipping through the shift schedule for the next week. He agreed with his superiors to reduce night patrols so he could spend more time at home. It meant less money, but he saw how important it was for the children. There was a bowl of popcorn on the table, a remnant of the movie night the three of them had had last night. For the first time in months, they laughed together, and it was like a breath of air. Alexa walked into the kitchen, her backpack slung over one shoulder. Dad, I'll be late for art class, she said, grabbing an apple from the table. Will you give me a lift? Of course, Thomas said, standing up. Is Noah ready? He's in the room, putting on his sneakers, she answered, chewing an apple. Today is his first baseball practice. He's kind of nervous. Nervous? Thomas smiled. He loves baseball. It'll be great. Yeah, but he's afraid he'll screw it up, Alexa said, rolling her eyes, but there was warmth in her voice. I told him he was cool, but you know Noah. I know, Thomas said, putting on his jacket. I'll go hurry him up. How about you? How are the courses? Like, Alexa shrugged, but her lips twitched into a smile. Normal. The teacher says I have talent. Maybe I'll even get to the exhibition. Seriously? Thomas stopped, his eyes lit up. That's cool, Lex. I want to see your work. Well, I don't know, she muttered, but it was clear that she was pleased. They are not perfect yet. I don't need perfect ones, he said with a wink. I need yours. She snorted, but smiled wider. Okay, Dad. Just don't start hanging them on the refrigerator like you did with Noah's drawings. No promises, he said, laughing. This was the first time in a long time that their conversation felt light, almost normal. Noah ran into the kitchen, his baseball cap askew. I'm ready, he said, his voice filled with a mixture of excitement and fear. Dad, what if I don't hit the ball? You'll hit it, Thomas said, adjusting his cap. And if not, you will practice. The main thing is to try. Will you come and watch? Noah asked, his eyes full of hope. Of course, Thomas said, clapping him on the shoulder. I won't miss it for anything. They left the house, and Thomas felt the weight in his chest become lighter. They still missed their old life, their mother, and the days when everything was simpler. But they were learning to live again, step by step, and this was more than he dared hope for. Autumn leaves rustled underfoot as Thomas, Alexa, and Noah walked along a path in Green Lake Park. Noah ran ahead, throwing pebbles into the water, and Alexa walked next to her father, her hands in her pockets. Dad, have you seen my new sketch? She asked, her voice cautious. The one with the tree? Yes, Thomas said, smiling. He's great, Lex. Where did the idea come from? I don't know, she shrugged. I was just sitting in the park, thinking. I love how trees stand even when everything around them changes. Deep, he said, looking at her. You are really talented. Don't start, she muttered, but her cheeks turned pink. And Noah? Did he tell you about his home project? About the volcano? Thomas laughed. Yes, he glued it all evening. He said he wants him to explode the coolest of all. He's such a bore, Alexa said, but there was warmth in her voice. But he's great. Trying. So are you, Thomas said, touching her shoulder. I'm proud of you both. Alexa looked at him, her gaze softening. Thank you, Dad, she said quietly. I I know you're trying too. Always, he said, and they walked on, watching Noah try to catch the duck. The kitchen smelled of coffee and toast. Thomas stood at the stove, frying eggs, and Noah sat at the table, doodling something in a notebook. Dad, can I invite Mom to the game? Noah asked without looking up. Well, if she wants. Thomas froze, but quickly pulled himself together. Of course, son, he said, trying to speak evenly. If you want, I'll talk to her. Is it true? Noah looked at him, his eyes lit up. Will she come? I don't know, Thomas said honestly, but we will ask. Fine? Noah nodded, returning to the drawing. Fine, I just miss her sometimes. I know, Thomas said, feeling a pang in his chest. But the pain was no longer as acute as before. He was beginning to accept that Olivia was part of their past, but not their future. Alexa walked in, her hair wet from her shower. What are you whispering about? She asked, grabbing the toast. Nothing, Noah said, but his cheeks turned red. Yeah, of course, she chuckled, but didn't press. Dad, can you help with my art project? You need to choose a topic. Let's do it after breakfast, Thomas said, putting down a plate of eggs. What do you think? Maybe something about the park? Boring, she said, but her lips twitched into a smile. Maybe about space, stars, planets. Sounds cool, he said. Noah, are you with us? If it's not about volcanoes, then no, Noah said, and they all laughed. Sarah sat opposite Thomas, her notebook open, but she listened more than wrote. How are things at home, Thomas? She asked. Have you and the children found a rhythm? I think so, he said, his voice calmer than before. We talk more. Alexa shows her drawings, Noah drags me to baseball games. It's like family, not the same as before, but ours. This is great progress, Sarah said, smiling. How are you? Does it still hurt to think about Olivia? Thomas paused, his gaze falling on his hands. Sometimes, he admitted, but not like before. I was angry, I hated her. Now, I just want the kids to be happy. If she is in their life, I can handle it. It's a mature approach, Sarah said. You are growing, Thomas. So are they. I hope so, he said, smiling for the first time during the session. They deserve better. Saturday morning at the Hill House began with the smell of burning dough and laughter wafting through the kitchen. Thomas woke up earlier than usual, awakened by the clinking of dishes. He came downstairs in his pajamas, his hair disheveled, and stood in the kitchen doorway, looking at the scene in front of him. Alexa stood at the stove, wearing an apron that was too big for her, and tried to turn the pancake over. Her face was concentrated, but the corners of her lips trembled with laughter. Noah, sitting on the table, took plates out of the cabinet, humming something from an advertisement. Lex, you're going to ruin everything again, Noah said, giggling. This damn thing looks like a UFO. Shut up, little one, Alexa replied, but her voice was full of warmth. Better than Mom's. Remember how her pancakes always stuck to the pan? Yeah, Noah said, his eyes lighting up. She called them crispy surprises. Thomas smiled, feeling warmth in his chest. He stepped into the kitchen, coughing to get attention. What's going on here? He asked, pretending to be stern. Breakfast without me. Dad, Noah jumped off the table, almost dropping his plate. Lex said she'll make pancakes, but it's not my fault if they don't taste good. Hey, Alexa poked him with a spatula, but laughed. They will be a masterpiece, okay? Dad, sit down, you can try first. Thomas sat down at the table, watching them fuss. Alexa placed a plate of pancake in front of him, lopsided but golden. Well, she asked, crossing her arms. Don't be silent. He took a bite, chewing with a serious look. He began, and Noah chuckled. Not bad. Even better than mine. Wow, that's the compliment of the year, Alexa said, rolling her eyes, but her smile was wide. Noah, get the syrup. Already. Noah put the bottle on the table, plopping down next to his father. "Dad, can we go to the park today? After baseball." "If Lex doesn't mind," Thomas said, looking at his daughter. "What do you say?" "As long as we don't play your stupid frisbee," she replied, sitting down with her own plate. "I want to draw. There's cool light there in the morning." "Agreed," said Thomas, taking another bite of the pancake. He looked at them, at Alexa, who was no longer hiding her drawings, at Noah, who was laughing without fear in his eyes. They talked about Mom's pancakes without anger, without pain, and it was a miracle. "Dad, what are you staring at?" Noah asked, chewing. "I'm just thinking how cool you are," Thomas said, his voice soft. "I'm proud of you." Alexa snorted, but her cheeks turned pink. "Don't start, Dad. Come on, eat." "Yeah," Noah added, "otherwise the pancakes will get cold." Subscribe to our channel so that your love doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think click to the next one.